It started like any other busy Monday morning. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, employees rushing in with their coffees, ready to start the day. But no one in that office was prepared for what would happen next. A well-dressed man walked into the building, confident, calm, clearly someone with purpose. But before he could even introduce himself, the receptionist looked him up and down and said the words that would change everything. "You'll have to wait outside." She didn't ask who he was, didn't offer him a seat, just assumed he didn't belong. Maybe it was the way he looked. Maybe it was something else. But what she didn't know, what no one in that office knew, was that the man she had just dismissed was actually the new CEO of the entire company. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. It was a moment packed with assumptions, judgment, and the kind of quiet disrespect that's often brushed off but never forgotten. And while the receptionist went back to her desk, and the rest of the staff carried on with their day, the man stood outside, watching, waiting, thinking. Within minutes, everything would change. The tension in the air would shift, emails would stop, meetings would be interrupted, and a cold silence would fall over the office as the truth came out. But before we get to that moment, before the CEO reveals who he really is and makes a decision that shocks everyone, let's rewind and look at how we got here. Because this story isn't just about power or titles. It's about perception, respect, and how one small moment can flip an entire company upside down. So, what would you do if the person you brushed off turned out to be your boss? Or worse, the one holding the keys to your future? His name was Marcus Taylor, a self-made entrepreneur, investor, and now the newly appointed CEO of a fast-growing tech firm. Just weeks ago, the board brought him in to turn things around. The company had been struggling. Profits were dipping. Morale was low. They needed someone bold, someone who could see past the surface and bring real change. What they didn't expect was that change would begin the moment he walked through the door. Marcus had built his career on patience and precision. Coming from humble beginnings, he'd faced his share of closed doors. He knew what it felt like to be underestimated. But today wasn't about proving anything. He wasn't looking for recognition or praise. He simply wanted to meet his new team, observe the culture, and get a feel for the environment before stepping into the spotlight. That's why he didn't announce himself. No fancy car, no entourage, just him, early, sharp, and ready. But the moment he stepped into the lobby, it was clear he'd already been judged. The receptionist barely looked up. Her tone was sharp, almost dismissive. "You're not on the list," she said. "You'll need to wait outside." He could have said something right then, flashed his ID, dropped a name. But instead, Marcus just nodded and walked out, standing near the glass entrance as employees passed by without a second glance. Inside, the office buzzed on, unaware of who they'd just sent out the door. It wasn't just about one receptionist. It was the tone, the attitude, the culture behind that reaction. And Marcus noticed everything. The way people greeted each other, who got acknowledged, who got ignored. This wasn't just a company with a broken balance sheet. It had something deeper to fix. And Marcus was already making mental notes. What he did next would change everything. While Marcus waited outside, unnoticed and unbothered, he watched the company he was about to lead, one careless interaction at a time. Inside, the receptionist chatted with a colleague, laughing as if the morning had started perfectly. She had no idea that the man she brushed off was reviewing not just her performance, but the tone she was setting for every visitor who walked through those doors. Upstairs, the leadership team gathered in the conference room, prepping slides and updates for what they thought would be a casual first meeting with their new CEO. Most of them had only seen Marcus's name on an email. A few had glanced at his LinkedIn profile, successful, impressive, but unfamiliar. And behind closed doors, some were already whispering doubts. "Do you really think he's a fit for our culture?" one asked. "I heard he came from a very different kind of company," another added. There was tension, not just from uncertainty, but from ego. Meanwhile, on the fourth floor, a junior employee named Dana, who worked in data analytics, sat at her desk watching the company newsfeed. She'd read the internal memo about Marcus's hiring. She'd even researched his background the night before, his track record for rebuilding companies, his focus on accountability, and how he prioritized people over titles. She admired that. But she also worried what it meant for people like her, the quiet ones, often overlooked, who didn't have big voices in big rooms. Back in the lobby, Marcus checked his watch. Still no one had come for him. No apology, no second glance. He took a deep breath, the kind that signals not frustration but clarity. This wasn't just a leadership change. This was going to be a culture shift, and the people inside had no idea what was coming next. Marcus finally stepped back into the building, this time not to wait, but to walk. Past the receptionist who barely glanced up again, past the elevators, straight to the executive floor. No one stopped him. No one recognized him. And that said more than any spreadsheet ever could. Upstairs, the leadership team was settling in, sipping coffee, joking about what the new guy might be like. One even muttered, "Hope he's not too hands-on." Laughter followed. They had no idea he was already in the building, and had been for nearly an hour, quietly watching from the sidelines. The head of HR stood up, ready to greet the new CEO when he arrived. "He should be here any minute," she said, glancing at the time. But before anyone could respond, the glass doors to the conference room opened, and there he was. Marcus walked in, calm and quiet, carrying nothing but a small notebook. The room fell into an awkward silence. Some stood, some didn't. Everyone looked confused. Then came the real moment. The receptionist, sent up by someone trying to fix the earlier mix-up, appeared behind him. She froze when she realized who he was. The color drained from her face. No one needed to explain anything. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply looked around the room, scanning the faces of the very people who would now report to him. He took a long pause before speaking, letting the discomfort settle in, the kind of silence that says everything's about to change. Across the room, Dana sat quietly in the back. She wasn't supposed to be there, but had been invited last minute to observe, and as Marcus's eyes met hers briefly, she saw it. Purpose, not anger, but also something else, a decision forming. One that would shake the company to its core. The room stayed still, almost frozen, as Marcus stepped fully inside. No one knew what to say. The receptionist stood in the doorway, her eyes locked on the floor. The executives, now realizing who they had ignored, shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Marcus flipped open his notebook, but before he said a word, the head of operations, a senior leader who had been with the company for years, leaned forward and forced a smile. "Mr. Taylor, apologies for the confusion downstairs. Security must have missed the memo," he said quickly, trying to regain control of the moment. Marcus looked up, calm as ever. "No, they didn't miss anything. I didn't announce I was coming early." Another pause. "I wanted to see how things really run here, when people think no one's watching." That landed like a punch. Before anyone could respond, his assistant, who had just arrived from the airport, entered the room quietly and placed a sealed folder in front of him. Marcus glanced at it, nodded slightly, then looked back at the group. "I've been reviewing everything since before I walked through those doors. Financials, HR reports, exit interviews, even anonymous employee surveys," he said. "But the most telling feedback I got was this morning." He tapped his notebook. "But before I get into all that," he added, "there's something you all should know." He opened the folder, revealing a list. Names, departments, dates. Some in that room were on it. The room tensed. "We're not just dealing with a culture problem here. We're dealing with something deeper. There's been a pattern. Favoritism, bias in hiring, ignored complaints, and we're going to address every single one." And then came the twist no one expected. "I've already spoken to the board," Marcus said, "and this, what we're doing today, isn't just an introduction." He closed the folder. "It's the beginning of a full internal audit, starting now. The air in the conference room grew heavy. Some executives avoided eye contact. A few turned pale. No one dared to speak. Marcus stood at the head of the table, quiet but commanding, letting the weight of his words settle in. "This company has been coasting on talent while failing its people," he said, "and from this moment on that ends." He handed the folder to his assistant, who began distributing copies around the table. Inside were detailed findings, data showing pay disparities, overlooked promotions, ignored reports from employees who'd quietly left. There was no denying it. Everything was backed by hard evidence. One of the senior managers spoke up, trying to defend a few of the decisions. But Marcus stopped him with a simple look. "If you have to explain it, you probably already know it wasn't right," he said. Then came the real shock. "I've made my first executive decision," Marcus announced. "Effective immediately, 3 members of this leadership team will be stepping down. The board has approved the transition. Their replacements have already been identified internally." A wave of stunned silence hit the room. One of the execs stood, demanding to know who made those choices. Marcus didn't flinch. "Your teams did. Through anonymous feedback. Through actions and results. They spoke. I just listened." Gasps rippled through the room. No one expected things to move this fast, but Marcus wasn't done. "Starting today, promotions will be based on performance, not politics. We're launching a mentorship program for junior staff. Pay equity reviews begin next week. And that receptionist, she's being reassigned to a role better suited for her strengths, away from the front desk." Just when it seemed everything had landed, Marcus turned to Dana, who sat frozen in her chair. "And Dana," he said, "I read your report from last quarter. You're being promoted to lead the analytics team." Everyone turned to her in disbelief, and in that moment, the company finally saw what real leadership looked like, not just in Marcus, but in what he chose to reward. The story wasn't just about a CEO walking in unannounced. It was about what happens when someone finally decides to lead differently. The room slowly shifted from stunned silence to something different: respect. Not just for Marcus, but for the way he handled it all. No yelling, no grand speeches, just action backed by truth. As people filed out of the conference room, some in disbelief, others deep in thought, a new energy filled the building. One built not on fear, but on possibility. Downstairs, the receptionist packed her things quietly. She hadn't been fired. Marcus didn't believe in public punishment. But she was being moved to a role where she gets support, training, and a second chance. He believed in growth, even for those who made mistakes. Dana sat in her new office later that afternoon, still processing everything. She'd spent years working hard behind the scenes, never thinking anyone noticed. And yet Marcus did. Not because she asked for it, but because she earned it. Her promotion wasn't just a personal win. It sent a message to every quiet worker in that building. You matter. Within weeks, changes rippled across the company. The culture began to shift. Conversations became more honest. People felt seen. And slowly, a place that once ignored potential started nurturing it instead. Marcus never brought up that first morning again. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been felt. It wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding. About creating a workplace where titles didn't decide how someone should be treated. And for those watching from the outside, the story of the Black CEO who was told to wait outside became something more than just a viral headline. It became a turning point, a reminder that leadership is about more than power. It's about presence, patience, and making sure that no one ever gets left waiting at the door again.